We see this in California in a myriad of ways. Just last week, in the Assembly Appropriations Committee, Senate Bill 52, what we know as the Disclose Act. I'm sure this room is familiar with that. The Disclose Act has been, watered down in a number of ways, but it does still remain that in print or broadcast media, if the Disclose Act were to become law, the top 3 donors responsible for that advertisement would have to reveal themselves with their logos. Even Anthony Kennedy, in his opinion on Citizens United, said, and I'll paraphrase him here, but this isn't going to be a problem, he said, it will neither corrupt nor appear to corrupt because there will be disclosure. The citizens are going to know who's behind these ads, and they're going to be able to make informed opinions about whether they support this based on this or that. We know that was not the case with Prop 37. People didn't find out about Monsanto being behind those ads saying that GMO labeling was going to cost California $1.3 billion, I think was the figure they tossed around, which was just nonsense, right? It was, when I saw that ad, I was scared. I said, really? It's going to cost us that much money? I'm sorry, aren't you just putting GMO materials on a label? I don't get how that's that much money. And of course it wasn't. It was a lie. But it enabled that to be narrowly defeated. And since that time, well, I'll get to that in a bit. Let me return to SB 52 for a minute. So in committee, SB 52 is getting its suspense hearing. Is it going to be taken out of suspense in the Senate Appropriations Committee hearing? And in the hearing, the 14 Democrats voted yes, and the 3 Republicans voted no. After the hearing, 3 Democrats changed their vote. The hearing was really well attended, probably 100 people, which is really unusual, speaking in support of SB 52. So after the hearing, Culver City's own Sebastian Ridley Thomas changed his yes vote to a no vote. Boyle Heights' Jimmy Gomez changed his yes vote to an abstain. And Bill Quirk from Fremont changed his yes vote to an abstention. Just by chance, like 2 days after this, my West LA Dem Club Yahoo group sent out a, did you know Sebastian Ridley Thomas just got $2,000 from Monsanto? And I thought, really? And I clicked on the link from the Secretary of State's office. In May, Sebastian Ridley Thomas got $2,000 from Monsanto, and in June, Bill Quirk got $2,000 from Monsanto, and Monsanto are the most vociferously against the Disclose Act of probably anybody in the country. Mm-hmm. And all I could think of was that Ralph Nader line, whatever one thinks about Ralph Nader, I thought this was a very good line, when he said, the Republicans have been bought and the Democrats have been bought more cheaply. And boy, is that true, $2,000. So now the Disclose Act may not come to the floor because it makes actual law, it changes the Constitution, it needs a 2/3 vote, and Monsanto went right in there and made that mischief. And it's an alarming case of money in politics. And I know that John Roberts likes to talk about quid pro quo corruption, and it seems to me that one could make a case that that was a quid pro quo moment. I don't know who got to Jimmy Gomez to change his vote, but it certainly was someone. So Prop 49, the day after we filed our voter instruction, our voter information guide statements, right? The day after the whole process was complete, right? You file a statement in support, the other guy files a statement in opposition, which incidentally was an assembly member named Brian Jones, and the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association signed that. Just basically, all caps, saying, we can't do this, this is, blah, 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 against the law. Nothing substantive. They never had anything substantive about corporate personhood, money, and politics. It's never that. It's always process. And so we then responded to what they said in our rebuttal. They responded to what we said in their rebuttal. The process was done. It was a Monday night. We thought, great, we're done with that. Now onward to the campaign. And the very next night we hear we're being sued by the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association to keep us off the ballot. Our author, Ted Lieu, said, it's nothing. It's, swatting a fly. They've got no case. The legislature has broad authority. Nobody ever spoke about the illegality of this. In the entire process of our getting to the ballot, and everybody knows that we have the right to do this. In fact, when I was going up to Sacramento for our first hearing in the Senate Elections and Constitutional Amendments Committee, I was going to stay in a friend's house who lives in Berkeley, and she and her husband were both out of the country, and I had to pick up keys to her house from the Secretary of State's lawyer, who's a guy I've known casually for years. So I walk in to get the keys, and his wife asks me what I'm doing there, and I say, here's what I'm doing, and she turns to her husband and she said, can they do that? And he said, well, the people can't do that, but the legislature can. So the Secretary of State's office, her lawyer, knows this is something we can do.
What's AB 50? What was
52. AB 52.
You mean SB 52? That's the Disclose Act. This was SB 1272, the Overturned Citizens United Act. I know, it's, as Lila Garrett always says to me, it's a lot of numbers. I don't get it, but yeah, it's a lot of numbers, but they're all very meaningful. So there we are, being sued, and it's going to the Third Circuit first. And one of the Howard Jarvis Taxpayer Association arguments is that the governor didn't even sign this bill, right? So thanks a lot, Jerry Brown, for not signing this bill, because there is this institutional resistance to direct democracy, to the people speaking directly. But we know that we have a First Amendment right and a 14th Amendment right. That meant so much that that they said it twice, right? That the rights of the people shall not be abridged. And we have a First Amendment right to petition the government for redress of grievances. And no state shall make any law which abridges the people's rights. And that's what they're proposing to do here. If this case is successful, the Howard Jarvis Taxpayer Association case, they are looking to take the whole voter instruction mechanism away from the people of California. Carol.
I think that they just did exactly what they had to do in order to throw a scare into the entire legislature, because 2/3 of 17 is 11.22. They now have 11 votes for the opposition, and we have 11 votes, and the opposition has 6. And so it's...
Well, but this predates that, and that was appropriations, the committee. It did pass out of the committee.
Out of the committee, but now that those people have defected, my guess, a political guess, is that the reason that they're giving any weight to this lawsuit is that it demonstrates that in the committee it didn't have a full 2/3.
Okay,
I'm postulating.
Right. Well, it's a related issue. SB 52 is certainly related to the 28th Amendment movement. What I would say to that is, as many of you know, the Chief Justice dissented from this, saying we were being disenfranchised, right, which is completely true. We're being disenfranchised, and wondering why the court didn't do what it does in these cases. For example, Prop 8, right? Prop 8 got a constitutional challenge almost immediately. And the court in that case did what is the custom in California, which was they allowed Prop 8 to go to the ballot. They did not interfere with the election. And they said, we'll consider this, the constitutionality of this measure after the people have spoken. We won't interfere with their right to speak.
I didn't realize you had switched to SB 52. I was talking
Carol, why don't
about.
you hold it till the end?
Yeah, okay.
Okay. So, in any event, the Chief Justice thought that they should have shown a little judicial restraint, which they did not. We were really disappointed in Goodwin Liu, who was Jerry Brown's only appointee to the bench. The makeup of the California Supreme Court is at the moment, there are 6 of them. There's a 7th, a guy named Tino Cuellar, who actually has his confirmation hearing on Thursday. He will be Jerry Brown's 2nd appointee. But of the 6 sitting, 5 were appointed by Republican governors, and just the one, Goodwin Liu. Now, Goodwin Liu, you may remember, progressives fought like mad to get Goodwin Liu onto the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. He was filibustered by the Republicans, I think, just because he was an Obama nominee. Because if you look at this guy, although he clerked for Ruth Bader Ginsburg, so that's interesting, but at his confirmation hearing, if you look at who spoke on his behalf, it's a very interesting cast of characters. And among them were Kenneth Starr, Jack's nodding like he knows this, right? Ken Starr spoke on his behalf, and a guy whom I'd never heard of named Richard Painter. Has anybody heard of Richard Painter? Richard Painter was George W. Bush's chief ethics lawyer. Ethics, right? I know, you can't make this stuff up, right? So, right? So what was Goodwin Liu doing in this incredibly derisive, if the legislature wants to hear what the people speak about this, feel about this, they should commission a Gallup poll. I mean, he really said this. He said the petitioners are likely to win on the merits, and after the election, we can't undo the harm that will have happened if these people vote. Well, we know who the harm would be too. And when you look at that also in light of Prop 8, when you think of the real harm that was done to people while California had that vile discussion, right? Real harm. What are they talking about here? Well, our suit is now scheduled to be heard on the 10th of November. So it will be after this election. Best case scenario, they see the error of their ways and go, oops, sorry, we were wrong. Well, you guys can go on the 2016 ballot. Another thing Goodwin Liu said, what does it matter? 2014, 2016, right? How many rivers will be poisoned by then, right? How many more? How many more of those, bomb trains will explode? How many, right? I mean, when you think of the harm that will be done by us not having this conversation, and I swear to you, I know they know what a conversation in California means. I just got a notification from one of the groups working on GMOs, and I hadn't even put this together with California. When I talk about California changing the conversation, I talk about Prop 8 and marriage equality. I talk about medical marijuana and the marijuana conversation that California started. This email, this woman said, it's undeniable that California's conversation about GMOs mushroomed into all of these states that are now having GMO discussions. No wonder they couldn't let us have this conversation, right? And they also know that it's not a conversation that you have to really explain to people, because everybody knows that this many people have all this power, make all this policy. If you talk to anyone about, do you think the elites have too much money and power and influence? There isn't anybody who's going to say, no, I think they're doing a fine job and they really should have more and this all works out nicely. Everybody knows that it doesn't. There was a study that people are less familiar with, but that just was released in April. It's now known as the Princeton study. It was put out by a Princeton professor named Gillens and a Northwestern professor named Page. The Gillens and Page study. They looked at 4 groups to determine what kind of impact they had on policy. They looked at economic elites and business-oriented interest groups, average citizens, and mass-based interest groups. They found that economic elites and business-oriented interest groups achieved their desired policy outcomes 100% of the time or nearly 100% of the time. Average citizens, mass-based interest groups achieved their desired policy outcomes 0 or nearly 0% of the time. And their conclusion was, we don't live in a democracy, actually, any longer. Now, to me, the most stunning thing about this study is that they studied the years from 1981 to 2001. They weren't even looking at a post-Citizens United world. So what that does is bring us back to Lewis Powell and Earth Day. Because in 1970, 1971, 20 million people got into the streets, 11 laws were enacted, the EPA was formed. Lewis Powell writes his memo, and the whole world changes. He gets on the court, the whole world changes. Look how quickly they implemented their plan to shut us out and to shut us down. 1981, it was already in effect. That's an astonishing thing. So what we are asking folks to do is to continue to act. On our website now, we have a petition to the California Supreme Court insisting, demanding that they restore Prop 49 to the ballot, which, if it doesn't happen by Thursday, isn't going to happen. But this will continue to have an impact on them. They claim to be impervious to public opinion, but we know they're not. We know that they respond to it. We've already begun to fax into the California Supreme Court. Already, 1,500. We've been rolling it out kind of slowly because we've got this long time till November 10th. So we're asking everyone to go to our website, send this fax, send the link to the fax to your groups. It's incredibly important that they hear from us. And also, as fate would have it, in California, we have something called retention elections for Supreme Court justices. I wasn't living in California at the time, but I did get a little whisper in New York where I was about Rose Bird. When do people remember Rose Bird? Being removed from the court because of her stance on the death penalty. And they also tossed off 2 justices with her. She was Jerry Brown's appointee to the Chief Justice of California.